Welcome back to the chat. If you are a pet owner, this next story may be one that you have thought about recently. A major dog food company is facing a major lawsuit. This after a pet owner filed a suit against Purina that alleges thousands of dogs have become ill or died as a result of eating Beneful dry kibble dog food. Some pet owners do not have any proof Purina Beneful is or was making their dog sick, but the 17-page lawsuit lists a number of symptoms similar to the ones their pets were having. Okay, joining us now is our legal contributor, Heather Quick. Here, first of all, to talk about how this class action lawsuit works.
It is, there are a lot of steps in order to get a class action. And one of the first steps is that there are going to be so many injured plaintiffs in the case that it's going to be too much to have 1,000 different lawsuits. So it really has to do with the number of people it encompasses that have been hurt. And then secondly, it looks at, and all the facts are going to be similar enough that we can do it once with thousands of plaintiffs because they're all going to be similar levels of proof and then also easier, you know, the similar defense.
Right.
So you have to go through that huge evaluation or do that, and then they've got to find enough plaintiffs, get them signed up. That's when you'll start seeing those commercials across all the country, and then move to certify it. So there are quite a bit of steps involved.
So let's talk about this actual case. These pet owners are saying that shortly, like real shortly, within hours sometimes of them feeding their dogs the Beneful food, they got violently ill and many of them died. And they're really saying, well, hey, my dog was fine, perfectly happy and healthy until they ate the dog food, which is not really evidence, but I mean, you know as a pet owner how but how hard is this going to be to prove?
Oh, it's going to be so difficult. It is going to be difficult. Again, there's what we would call causation. So they've got to prove causation, and that is not easy. Even in, the easy thing for me to compare it to with class actions are when you have those toxic torts, the water, the stuff it's proving that these ingredients in this particular food caused the illness, and that link, that causation is a high burden. Even though it's a civil burden, it's a lot, and then, okay, what are the damages? I know many people have pets are as if they are their children, but the law is not really probably going to recognize it quite that much,
So yeah, to be continued on this, because this isn't the last that we've heard of that story.
No.
And there's another story we want to get your take on, and it involves a proposal before the state legislature that would have big implications for couples seeking a divorce and spousal support in the state of Florida. Florida is one of the few states that still allows judges to grant alimony for life. The Florida legislature tried to do away with lifetime alimony 2 years ago, but Governor Scott vetoed the bill, saying the changes could impact payments to people already receiving alimony. This newest effort no longer includes that provision and seeks to establish guidelines for how long alimony should be awarded. So Heather, your specialty is divorce law. You specifically represent women. Talk about first your initial take on this story.
It's awful, I will tell you. It's going to be a very detrimental law to women. When currently now you've been married more than 17 years, and then that is one of the first steps to qualify for permanent alimony. And then we go to a need and ability standard. That eliminates that. So what we're looking at is a lot of 50-year-old women who have probably been married, who have been obviously married maybe since they were, in their early 20s and have dedicated their lives to supporting their husband but staying home with kids, homemaker, not going to get permanent alimony. And as the law as it stands right now, they would. And that is what's fair and equitable in the law. And there's a lot of factors the courts can consider, but it's going to be detrimental to women. And that's just one part of this bill, which there's a lot that they don't share with the public.
What are the circumstances that a judge would grant alimony for life?
Just like I had just mentioned, it is one of, a long-term marriage. So that's
long-term being 17 years.
Or more, yes. Now, there can be instances where it's less. It's much more rare. And, really, if we're looking at a couple, say they married at 20, they're divorcing at 40. So it's 20 years, but you're young, you're 40, there's time. There may still be alimony for you to get back on your feet, but it's far different than
Can these people
older.
be grandfathered in? For instance, the cases that it's already established that you're paying alimony for life and then the laws change, can they grandfather those people in? Although that wouldn't make any difference to the future people that you're talking about, I know that.
Well, I'm talking about future divorces.
Yeah.
And the bill was bill was vetoed by Governor Scott 2 years ago because it's pretty much the exact same bill, but it included retroactivity, meaning, hey, I'm paying alimony now, but now I can go back and get rid of it based on this law. So that would be
Oh.
unconstitutional. So that is not in this bill.
So that's the opposite of what
totally
I'm talking
separate,
about with the grandfather. That's the retroactive.
Right, no, and that's
Yeah.
not going to be allowed
Yeah.
at all. I mean, it doesn't matter what arrangements, what agreements between spouses and the financial.
So when would this be passed if this proposal gets favored?
When the session ends this spring, and then it would become effective, it will be effective this October.
Wow.
So expect to see a lot of divorces from men who now won't
But
have
is
to
it
pay
really
alimony.
fair, on the flip side, is it fair to have an alimony for life? I mean, because as a woman then, I'm not going to ever get married again. I'll just live with my boyfriend forever because ex-hubby's going to pay. I mean, that to me seems the flip side
That happens a
isn't
lot.
fair.
Well, but really it doesn't, because there's been a law in place for years now called the cohabitation. You can't do that. You can't
Oh,
skirt
really?
it. Yeah, so you can get rid of your alimony if you're just essentially, hey, we're just not marrying for that reason. But I have been doing this, for several years, and it just doesn't happen like that. And of
Okay.
course men don't like it, but it's the way it should be. And women give up so much more in proportion to men during those prime years of earning.
yeah.
And so then he can go on and really, really continue to earn money, and you'll never be able to build up to that. You may get half of the property and money, but it's going to be unjust. And we didn't even touch on how it's going to affect child support. There's a lot in there, that law about children that people don't address, and that, again,
Right.
it's going to be difficult.
All right, we'll have you back on to talk about it as it progresses, but there's another story we want to talk about. Speaking of divorce, there's a lot of press circulating surrounding the divorce of a U.S. congressman from the 9th Congressional District, 9th. Representative Alan Grayson, who is in the middle of a contentious divorce, is asking an Orlando court to annul his 24-year-old marriage to his wife, Lolita, asserting that she commented or committed bigamy when she married Grayson back in 1990. Grayson claims that his wife's first marriage was not dissolved until 1994 and claimed that her attorneys are disputing that. Now, Heather, what is your take on this case as far as the bigamy is concerned?
What I read is she was divorced. She said she was divorced in, I think, Guam in 88, 89. And he's saying, no, that wasn't valid. Now, if in fact she got what was a valid divorce in Guam, maybe different from in Florida, and she can prove that, then I think she'll be fine. And otherwise, she was certainly divorced in 94 in Florida for certain. And so when we look at a divorce, there's several dates that are defining. One of the important ones is, okay, the date of marriage, because, if you enter the marriage with a lot of money and you keep it separate, so it's just an important date, the date of marriage. So there is clearly a reason, and based on, my cynical approach, it has to do with money, and he's wanting to keep the money and keep it from her. So something is important to him about that 94 date, because I would bet in the whole property scheme to then try to have that as the date of, really divorced. They weren't, but then I guess he's saying they weren't ever legally married because,
And you
they
say
didn't
that's
renew
all
their
in an effort
vows.
to try to retain money.
Absolutely,
it's
because if they weren't married, if you live with somebody and have their children and help
Or
them,
children.
right, and help
In this
them
case.
build their life, their career, you're getting nothing. Maybe, nothing, no part of that property, nothing, unless you are titled on it. And then that's just civil law, which isn't going to really look out for spousal rights like divorce law. So,
So the couple has 4 children.
yes.
Is she a candidate for lifetime alimony?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, they were married 24 years. Now we look at the assets. She will get half of those, and so there's there's several steps to the process, but most likely, it depends on, based on the law as it is now, what does he earn, what's his ability to pay, what are her needs, and that's a big part of that, and so that would be part of the evaluation.
All right. Well, thank you, Heather. We appreciate your perspective on all of this. If you have any questions or need any legal advice, you can always check out the Quick Law Group's website, which is quicklawgroup.com. And coming up on the chat, we are talking romantic relationships from divorce to this. Dr. Richard Marks is coming up next. We'll be right back.